Yasher Koach. You may be seated. Miriam heard the voice of God. As a child, even before Moses was born, Miriam used to run around and say, "I believe in a better future." She would say to her parents, "I know that we are going to birth the redemption." And her parents would roll their eyes and say, "How could you know such a thing, little child?" But the night that Moses was born, their whole house filled with light. And Miriam's father bent down and kissed her on her kepi and said, "My beautiful daughter, perhaps you are right." And yet, there came to be a time when Miriam watched as Moses was placed in a basket in the river, and her parents looked at her and said, "Maybe you were wrong. Maybe you didn't hear the voice of God." But she stood at a distance and watched him in the reeds, knowing that it was on her to make this prophecy come true. She knew that her brother was destined to lead the Jewish people out of Mitzrayim. And with her quick thinking and her actions, she made sure that it happened. The voice of God told her, "There is hope, there is a future, and you, Miriam, you will make it happen." Miriam heard the voice of God right before leaving Mitzrayim at midnight, right before leaving Egypt. She went door to door. As people were packing their food and their clothes, she said to the women, "Don't forget your musical instruments. Don't forget your drums. Don't forget your timbrels. Don't forget your tambourines and your flutes." People said, "Why? Aren't we fleeing? Don't we need to only carry our basics?" But God spoke to Miriam, and she heard God's voice. God said, "There will be joy. There will be dancing. And you, Miriam, you will make it happen." Miriam heard the voice of God throughout her life, as a child, as an adult, when she was old. She heard the voice of God when she was upset, and the voice of God told her it was okay to cry. She heard the voice of God when she was afraid, and the voice of God told her to reach out to others, to not be alone. Miriam heard the voice of God when she was angry, and the voice told her to express her feelings and to work through her troubles. When Miriam was happy, when she was content, when she was at peace, the voice of God told her to sing out and to give thanks for all she had. The voice of God spoke to her, and Miriam, throughout her life, she listened. She heard God's voice, God telling her that there was power in her words and that she had a unique gift to give to the Jewish people. And so she did. Our sages across the tradition, across the years, from the rabbis in the 200s to the rabbis in the 1400s, they keep on saying the same thing, that throughout Miriam's life, she hears the voice of God and she responds. When she saw suffering, the voice of God tells her to step up, to stop it. When she saw injustice, the voice of God told her to be a mensch, to care for others. When she saw someone in need, she responded to that voice. When she saw indifference amongst the Jewish people, she responded to that voice. Her Torah, her teachings, took shape in the moral and the ethical because she responded to the voice of God. And throughout her whole life, the voice of God told her that even in her freedom, she would encounter cruelty, and that it was up to her to push back. The voice of God said, "You, Miriam, you will make kindness and caring happen." In the Talmud, there's a list of 7 women who heard the voice of God and responded. 7 women who became prophets not only of their own lives, but prophets of the entire nation. And Miriam is on that list. So is Devorah, who we saw in our Haftarah this morning. And the rabbis, the sages who interpret our Torah, they imagine what Miriam heard God say. The rabbis of the Talmud in the 500s, they say that the voice of God is what told Miriam that there was hope, that there was a future, even when things were difficult. In the Mechilta, the Rabbi Yishmael, a rabbinic interpretation from the year 200, the rabbis there imagine that the voice of God tells Miriam that even in difficult times, that there will still be joy in music and dance and community. Rashbam and Hitzkuni, rabbis who lived in the 11th and 12th centuries, they taught that Miriam heard the voice of God telling her that her speech, her words, her emotions, and her teachings would bring about a healed society. Now, there's a wild thing, though, about the section of the Talmud that says that only 7 women are recorded in the Torah as hearing the voice of God, as hearing prophecy. The Talmud disagrees with itself. The Talmud says, well, actually, 1 million people of all genders received prophecy in every generation. Not only 7, 1 million people. The question the Talmud raises, though, is whether people are able to listen to that voice, whether people are able to respond to that voice of God. Can they respond to that voice of God and change their own lives? Can they respond to that voice of God and shape the future of the Jewish people, of the world? The issue, the Talmud says, is that most people don't listen. Most people don't respond to the voice that tells them that they can be part of a change, that they can be part of a joyous future. And there are all sorts of reasons for that, right? All sorts of reasons. Perhaps this teaching from the Talmud and Miriam's life, perhaps they invite us all to listen for that voice of God. Where is the voice of God telling us to speak out? Where is the voice of God telling us to be authentic to our emotions, to cry or to laugh or to be angry? Where is the voice of God telling us to champion the stranger and the downtrodden, to fill our earth with kindness? Miriam heard the voice of God, and God's voice is calling out to each of us too, if we will only listen. Shabbat Shalom.